welcome back, guys. This is your South Carolina Realtor, and today we're going to be talking about heirs property and why it is such a huge problem for a lot of people across the entire United States. So we're going to be going over 8 things that you have to do in order to mitigate the process of actual probate whenever either your grandparents or your great-grandparents pass away and you're not exactly sure who the home belongs to now because they passed away without a will. So stay tuned, and I've got something special for you guys today. Now, I have to start off by saying that this is not legal advice. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not anybody that practices in the actual law profession itself. This is just my opinion on the research that I've done personally in regards to heirs property. So let's get into it. So heirs property, and commonly referred to as heir property, it is basically a process that happens whenever your grandparents or your great-grandparents pass away without a will. Now, we don't even know who the property belongs to because they have so many descendants between their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and the ownership itself is split up between all the different tiers. So what happens? So probate. Now, here in South Carolina, the process is called probate, and all of the deceased assets are basically sent to the actual court itself. There's a huge docket that ensues and a lot of paperwork that goes along with that, and they're basically getting all of their assets into a single account per se. Now, someone in the family themselves are going to have to step up and actually file the petition to get all of this settled. Now, what exactly does that look like? Basically, you're going to have somebody, like I said, a family member or a descendant, to basically step up, and preferably it's somebody that everybody likes in the family, in order to basically coordinate this entire process per se. So what happens next? Well, first off, they're going to have to go down to the probate court, file a petition in order to get all of those assets, not necessarily released, but to get an actual docket, everything listed out. That way they can start the process of distributing it to all of the heirs themselves. So that's your first item. Item number 1 is to have somebody take control of the actual process itself, so that way everything can be distributed down to the heirs. Secondly, you're going to want to get a trusted attorney that specializes in heirs property in order to get a copy of the deed, to figure out who's on the deed, and then see and build out a family tree in order to get all of the heirs listed, and that way they know exactly who to go after to distribute all the assets themselves. Now, item number 3 is the actual family tree itself that I just mentioned. Now, what you're going to have to do is get all of the descendants listed out on this family tree. And basically, you're going to have to add in even the ones that passed away, because if they passed away and they had children, their children are also able to get a portion of those assets from the deceased assets and property itself. Now, item number 4 is going to be basically getting all of the names and all of the phone numbers for all of the descendants. Now, why is this so important? And that is specifically so that the attorney knows who to contact, who to send out letters to, in order to get that actual quitclaim deed, which I'll talk about later on. And that way they know exactly who to actually give the property to, and all the assets to get distributed to all the different family members in order to get their share of the actual assets themselves. Now, item number 5 is to actually meet with the actual probate lawyer themselves. Now, this is really important, so that way you build trust with that attorney. They know exactly what it is that you're trying to do in regards to, your grandparent or even, your mom or dad that may have passed away without that will. And that way they know exactly who actually needs the assets to be distributed to. So item number 6 is going to be basically getting an actual valuation of the property itself. Now, if it's land, an actual house, multifamily home, whatever it may be, deceased assets basically have to have a valuation. And that valuation is very, very important, because depending on how many children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren they have to break up the actual assets themselves in order to be given out to all the different family members. Now, item number 7 is deciding whether or not you want to keep the property or if you want to sell the property. And at the end of the day, that is up to the person that stepped up which is now called the executor or the administrator of the actual property itself, to determine whether or not it's being kept or it's being sold and what happens with all of the assets for the family themselves. Now, keep in mind that particular property that is now left in probate, there's property taxes, there's upkeep, there's an innumerable amount of items to keep in mind in regards to this particular property and the actual assets that are being set in probate at this point. So being able to make that decision is a very, very tough one, but definitely do not take it lightly. So last but not least, number 8 is your quit claim deed. So this is very, very important because it transfers ownership to one family representative, and typically that's going to be your executor or the administrator of the estate itself. So this is very, very important because you have to keep in mind that the upkeep for the property and the property taxes, they are not typically going to be paid and or upkept by all of the family members. So what you're going to have to do is just have that one single person in charge of the property. That way they can keep up with everything. Now, if everybody wants to pitch in, kudos, but at the same time, it's just going to be left up to one person. So I say all this to say that it's very, 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 very important to have a will for your parents, yourself, your grandparents, whoever it may be. That way this entire process is avoided completely. I'll do a separate video on intestacy, which basically means dying and or passing away without a will. But at the same time, you have to understand that this is very, very important to everybody involved. Keep in mind also that property taxes themselves are due every single year. So even if your grandparent or great-grandparent, your spouse, and people like that, if they have been paying property taxes up until they passed away, that's a great thing. Now, after they pass away and no one's taking the property taxes, what happens to the property? Well, government takes your property because nobody paid the property taxes. They take your land because nobody paid the property taxes. So I may do a separate video in regards to that. However, stay tuned for the next one. It's your South Carolina Realtor. I'll see you guys later on.